Hi everyone. So this is the pre-reading video for Amateur Eyes, the first chapter from On Looking. So in a pre-reading video, sometimes we'll do pre-reading in class, sometimes I'll do it in a video. What I want to do is kind of give you some things to look for. Sometimes the readings that we have, they might seem a little bit complicated, they might be hard to get into. So I want to kind of get you to pay attention to certain things, to get you to think about certain things before you go into it, be aware of certain things so that you are better able to understand what in fact you're reading. One of the issues here with this one is, again, I wanted you all to have the book. I did scan this first chapter. I'm not going to scan all of the other chapters. It just takes too long. And as you can see here, sometimes I make mistakes. And so this one is cutting off a big chunk of that here. I did include this one because some of you may have had some issues getting the text at the beginning of class. Hopefully you'll be able to get the text for the next chapters. But I do have most of this one. Some of these words are missing. So I'm going to just go ahead and read this first section. I've got the actual book here. I'm going to go ahead and read this first section, and then if are relying on this, then you'll know what this actually says. And then I'm going to talk about what it is that the author's actually doing here. So, Amateur Eyes. And then I'll just start off here that the title is talking about being an amateur at something as opposed to being a professional. And so the idea of looking at something as an amateur, as how most of us look at things, right? We aren't professionals in things. And so when we look at the world, we may see only certain things. And I think that's something that she wants us to consider here is that how might people who are specialists or professionals in a field look at something versus how the rest of us might look at that. And she wants us to kind of think about how to expand the way in which we look at things and look at them in a potentially more complex fashion. So, Amateur Eyes. She says, you missed that. Right now, you are missing the vast majority of what is happening around you. You are missing the events unfolding in your body in the distance and right in front of you. By marshaling your attention to these words, helpfully framed in a distinct border of white, you are ignoring an unthinkably large amount of information that continues to bombard all of your senses. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the ambient noise in a large room, the places your chair presses against your legs or back, your tongue touching the roof of your mouth, the tension you are holding in your shoulders or jaw, the map of the cool and warm places on your body, the constant hum of traffic or a distant lawnmower, the blurred view of your own shoulders and torso in your peripheral vision, a chirp of a bug or a whine of a kitchen appliance. This ignorance is useful. Indeed, we compliment it and call it concentration. Our ignorance concentration enables us to not just notice the scrawls on the page, but also to absorb them as intelligible words, phrases, and ideas. Alas, we tend to bring this focus to every activity we do, not just the most complicated, but also the most quotidian. To a surprising extent, time spent going to and fro, walking down the street, traveling to work, headed to the store or a child's or one's own school, is unremembered. It is forgotten not because nothing of interest happens. It is forgotten because we failed to pay attention to the journey to begin with. On the phone, worrying over dinner, listening to others or to the to-do lists, replaying in our own heads, we miss the world making itself available to be observed. And we miss the possibility of being surprised by what is hidden in plain sight in front of us. So, sorry, I got to move my picture over here some. So, move it over here so it's completely out of the way. So, we have that she's talking about this sense that we something that we all on some level understand, that when we pay attention to one thing, we stop paying attention to a lot of other things, right? And she's kind of listing a lot of those things to help us understand that. So she's got some kind of interesting abstract ideas about what attention is, but the way she's going to talk about this is by getting us to think about these physical things. You missed that, right? Going to say you missed the hum of the fluorescent lights. The ambient means just background, right? Ambient noise in a large room. The places your chair presses against your legs or your back. You don't pay attention to that, right? Some of the physical sensations you may not pay attention to how your clothes feel on your body and things like that. And so she's providing a number of examples of that to get us to think about our attention. And I think that's one of the things to keep in mind about what she's doing here. She's got some big, complicated ideas about what attention is. She's going to dig into some psychology here in places, but she talks about it in this very physical sense, in this way in which is very tangible, things that we could actually touch, things that we could actually see. And I think that's important to help us understand the ideas. That's why this is going to work for us. If she were just talking about this as you might talk about it in a psychology class, potentially, without giving these kind of examples, it might be harder for us to get our minds around. So, right now, she's kind of saying, look, let me think about what your experience is right now in this room when you are reading this book, right? And let me get you to think about some of those physical sensations and see how that relates to some of our ideas about attention. Keep some of that in mind, right? That's one of the things that she's going to be doing here. And so as you go through the text, that might help us understand some things. She says at the end, alas, we tend to bring this focus to every activity we do, not just the most complicated, but also the most quotidian. Interesting, important word here. Quotidian means like the everyday things, things that are just so everyday and normal that we never pay attention to them. So she says the most quotidian, and then she says gives an example of the things that are quotidian, the things that are everyday. Time spent going to and fro, right? Walking down the street, traveling to work, headed to the store or to a child's or one own school are remembered. So just walking around, those are these everyday or quotidian things that we do. We don't remember a lot about those, right? And the idea is that since we do so much of this stuff every day, we just kind of block some things out, right? There are things um, that we don't pay attention to, and so understanding something about that word, I think will be important for this. And then she talks about all the things that we might be doing that keep us from looking at the things around us. And so as she goes through this, she's going to, in fact, later on begin to talk about some things that are potentially um, more complex, right? So you can see here down at the bottom of the page 3. She says there's a certain bias to every that has been named by the French deformation professionnelle, the tendency to look at every context from the point of view of one's profession. The psychiatrist sees symptoms of diagnosable conditions in everyone from a grocery store checkout cashier to his spouse. The economist views the simple buying of a cup of coffee as an example of macroeconomic phenomenon, right? What she is saying there is that if you're a professional in a certain field, you're going to notice certain things, right? Economists think about everything as being about economics, right? Psychologists think about everybody as having a potential psychological problem, right? Um, and so she starts to think about how, and she brings up that term there and explains how that fits into some of the things that we're going to be thinking about. So she begins to kind of set some of that up. She's talking also about the nature of this book. As I mentioned, that this book is about her taking a number of walks around the block with different people who have different levels of expertise. And she's going to tell us that that's what's going on here. And when she talks about what follows is the record of 11 walks around the block I took with expert seers who told me what they saw, right? The idea of starting to pay how experts pay attention. And then she says, no, actually 12 walks. Um, and Because she's going to walk by herself at first. But so she's talking about how this book is going to be structured. And so this first one is just kind of an introduction. And then as we go through later, she's going to go through a number of walks that she's going to take and see what other people are going to see, what she has not been paying attention to potentially. Okay. And then she actually starts to walk around the block some throughout there, and she talks about a block in New York City, and she talks about some of the things that she sees or that she misses. And then again, she's going to bring up some, kind of deeper concepts. She says every child has been admonished by a teacher or a parent to pay attention, but no one tells you how to do that. And then she says the consensus is that it is in some way taxing. Taxing means it's hard on your brain. Gustav Fechner, a 19th century German physicist, claimed he felt a physical sensation when intending a strain forward in the eyes and when listening one directed sideways in the ears, right? And so the father of modern psychology, William James, reported that when attending to memory, he felt an actual rolling out upwards of the eyeballs. And so realize that she is going to be kind of digging into what some professionals have said about some of this, how they are going to be thinking about some of these ideas. And so she's using this example of a walk as a way to get us to think about more deeply about the idea of paying attention to things. And one of the reasons I want you to think about this is that there are things all around us that we might not be paying attention to, but if we begin to pay attention to, there's always something deeper. In the writing assignment that I gave you for this, I wanted you to actually find something that you hadn't been paying attention to. And start to pay attention to it. And one of the examples I gave you was those asphalt tags, right? You'll see I have a picture of these little plastic things that are in the street. You might not have never noticed that were there. But if you begin to notice them, you'll see them all the time. And then if you ask a question, I actually include an article about why they're there, right? They're there for a very specific reason. And it tells you something about how the city itself actually functions. So keep all that in mind as you're going through all of this. You've got you'll read this, then you've got the discussion board, then you've got the writing assignment. So that's this portion of what we have for this week, and then so complete all of that.